Well, the people of Gauteng this week were in for a shocking surprise when they had to recharge their electrical bills and were met with 2 additional rates and tariff increases. Now, some residents are still confused as to what exactly the 200 Rand extra maintenance as well as service costs by some municipality actually entails, while the overall Eskom tariff implemented as of the 1st of July has sparked fears that these could also lead to potential unrest in the metro. Let's now welcome Mr Chris Yelland, energy expert and managing director of EE Business Intelligence and energy advisor to OUTA, to help us make sense of some of these latest developments. Chris, as always, great having you with us. A very good afternoon to you. So let's start by understanding all these fancy terms. I mean, these increases in both levels and who exactly is affected at this stage. Also underlining or noting that about 670,000 people, according to data by the city, as stated, live below that lower bound of poverty line. So in essence, we just want to know what the term, the affordability subsidy charge being raised as a subsidy to the Homeline 28 tariff mean.
Yeah, no, this is not a tariff. It's not a tax. It's not a levy. It's part of the electricity price. So what we're seeing here is being applied by City Power Johannesburg, not by other cities like Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, etc. This is specifically related to City Power Johannesburg. And it applies, what we're talking about here is a fixed charge per month that has for the first time been added to people who are on a prepayment meter. Now, prepayment meters were introduced and are mainly there for people of lower income brackets. And by that, I'm talking about indigent people, poor people, and people with a relatively low income. Upper income and middle income households are generally on what we call postpaid meters, and those have always had a fixed component. But what is being added now is a fixed charge per month for people who are on a prepayment meter, which are predominantly indigent and poor people. And so this tariff is, this new tariff that's been applied from the 1st of July is hammering people who use relatively low amounts of electricity per month. And it comprises 2 components, a so-called service charge and a so-called capacity charge, which in total totals 230 rands, including VAT, per month. And this is applied whether or not you use any electricity. So even the lowest electricity consumers are now forced to pay 230 rand even before they get their first kilowatt hour of electricity.
Now, the issue, Chris, of some municipalities not having conducted those cost affordability surveys or studies, as we understand by the court, they did not qualify for the increase. And that number is, I think it's about 66, right? But the issue is that residents are saying they don't know, they weren't even engaged with to be part of these studies. And furthermore, the criticism is that these notices are only advertised in their respective websites, and the message actually never reaches its intended audience.
Yeah, I think that applies really to this 230 Rand fixed charge. I think it's coming as a shock and a surprise to low-income households, that when they take, for example, they may have been spending 500 Rand a month to buy 200 units of electricity. That's 200 kilowatt hours of electricity. That was last month. This month, the same 500 Rand is going to only buy half the amount of kilowatt hours because of the 230 Rand that is deducted from the 500 Rand before you even buy your first kilowatt hour of electricity. And I think that's been very poorly communicated. The public participation process really doesn't reach the public and the affected parties. But what you're talking about just now was what is known as the cost of supply studies. And throughout South Africa, there are about 180 municipalities who distribute electricity. And recently, the courts ruled that 100 out of these 188 their applications for price increases were defective because they had not submitted a cost of supply study, and therefore NERSA should never have allowed the increases. And the court set aside those increases and only allowed increases for those 66 municipalities in South Africa that did supply a cost of supply study with their application. But of course, NERSA, as is typical, immediately has appealed this judgment. And so the price increases will proceed on the 1st of July. They have proceeded until the appeal has been heard one way or another. But initially, the courts ruled that only 66 of the tariff application increases were valid. The remainder were not valid because of lack of cost of supply studies, but that is now being challenged in an appeal submitted by NERSA, which is what they inevitably do. It's a kind of a stalling tactic that is well known in South Africa. You know, Chris, speaking of NERSA, and I know you mentioned in one of your articles that, I mean, this could potentially lead to some civil unrest, particularly in those municipalities where people just simply cannot afford the new tariffs. I mean, there are more increases on the cards, we know, for next year of up to almost 44.5%. And NERSA, as we understand at this stage, has not responded whether or not they will approve these. We're now well over 100 days without load shedding. And suspicion is that these new tariffs, the 200 Rand cap, so to speak, are just a way to pay for the recent constant supply of electricity, and also calls to make sure that the billing structure be more comprehensive as well as transparent, particularly under this new administration where people are the first point of contact in critical decisions where they are directly affected and have to bear the costs. Look, I must stress that this 230 Rand fixed charge that has just recently been applied on prepayment meters is only the city of Johannesburg. And to be frank, it will have absolutely minimal impact or benefits to the city of Johannesburg or to the whole country, because you know, it's only being applied to prepayment meter customers. And I think they're going to have a very hard time collecting this 230 Rand, even though these are prepayment meters. What this is going to encourage is increased levels of electricity theft and bypassing of meters, because frankly, you cannot get 230 Rand out of people who don't have the money. And what it means is that people will actually resort to electricity theft because their money, which would typically be 500 Rand a month spent on electricity, is now going to buy them only half the amount of electricity that it would have bought last month. And it's going to force people, you know, people have got a budget and a certain income. And if they don't have the money, they've got to either buy electricity, or they've got to, you know, they're either going to cut back on food to buy electricity, or cut back on transport to buy electricity, or they're going to increase the levels of electricity theft. So I don't think that this is going to make a major contribution to the very poor financial state of the city of Johannesburg. Chris, thank you so much, as always, for that input there. Mr. Chris Yelland, energy expert there on the recent tariff hikes.